A very good evening to you, dear friends. My name is Igor Yakovenko. It's 10:01 p.m. here in Kiev. And as we agreed, we have another live broadcast, the 169th episode of the program Mediafrenia. It is truly fascinating to observe that it is not merely the senseless and brutal war itself, which was originally started without any clear reason or even a single visible cause to justify it. Neither the tragic and senseless loss of life of more than 1 million Russians in Ukraine, nor the ongoing political repressions, nor the real and already severe decline in the overall quality of daily life itself, have incited any significant form of protest among the Russian elite. For the first time, something resembling a revolt against the authorities' actions, something vaguely reminiscent of a split among the inhabitants of the media and political sphere, occurred as a result of Telegram slowing down and the threat of its complete blocking. The most vocal and intense protest against the authorities' recent actions came from one of the most sycophantic figures in Russia's entire political field, widely known as Seryoga the paratrooper. Well, as it turns out, this was quite unexpected. Known as the leader of the A Just Russia party and simultaneously the head of its faction in the State Duma.
Do you know who is currently in charge of operating the Telegram? Go to the front lines. NSVO. The guys who are shedding blood, their only connection with their families and loved ones is through this. What are you doing, idiots? I call things by their names. Idiots, what are you doing? People are raising money for the SVO. For many people, the only way to communicate with their families and loved ones is through Telegram channels. Yes, Mac is a great messenger. But let's at least give people the chance to decide for themselves what they want to use. I want to say it once again. Those who are doing this are absolute scoundrels. Total scoundrels. And we must remember that innocent people are dying out there right now. They're dying for Russia, for the Russian world. And what are you doing? Think about it.
Just look at how incredibly fired up Sergei the paratrooper got. Really, it was just like that. Exactly, just like that. Although, to be honest, there is one problem here. It's telling that not a single name was mentioned. This brave Carbonari didn't name anyone, even though that name is already known to everyone. It is perfectly clear that without the explicit and direct approval from Putin, Roskomnadzor would never have taken such actions. By the way, dear friends, many of you know who is currently heading Roskomnadzor. Well, that's the person directly responsible for blocking Telegram. Does the name Andrei Yuryevich Lipov mean anything to any of you? Well, he is now the head of Roskomnadzor. He's an extremely private and low-profile administrative mouse who only recently finally decided to slowly emerge from the extensive and winding corridors of the administration. Well, recently, what am I saying? Almost 6 years ago, he replaced the famous Zharov. So he crawled out from the corridors of the presidential administration. Well, it is quite obvious that he is a figure who doesn't really carry a great deal of significance, with virtually non-existent political weight. So basically, that's what I mean. It is perfectly clear that the group of scoundrels Mironov is referring to in his statement are Kirienko and Putin. That is precisely the reason why, because those previously unmentioned names of fools and deceitful scoundrels were explicitly mentioned in the speech, Mironov's speech. That's why Solovyov decided to pull the paratrooper's earring, and he did it rather harshly, just to keep him in line.
That's why, by the way, Kaja Kallas, I'm not sure, please tell me. Have Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas been added to the list of terrorists? Are there criminal cases opened against them? But what about Borrell? Please explain to me, why is that? The EU leadership, Kubilius and others, why haven't criminal cases been opened against them? I think instead of doing something phenomenally tactless, bordering on populism and vulgarity, a statement like the one Sergei Mikhailovich Mironov made yesterday, I think it's absolutely unacceptable to say the things Sergei Mikhailovich said. Well, you see, I'm going to ask an uncomfortable question, but has Sergei Mikhailovich personally been to the front? To make such claims without being there on the ground and without having knowledge of the specific situation, even on such a sensitive issue as Telegram and so on, well, that is just inappropriate. And I was very upset that Sergei Mikhailovich did that. It's simply inappropriate. By all means, express your concerns. That's not the issue. But in this manner, from my perspective, this situation is entirely and utterly unacceptable.
That's how Solovyov rebuked Mironov. And then the retired general and State Duma deputy Gurulyov decided to support the leadership, stating that the deliberate slowing down of Telegram is perfectly normal. He claimed that it's actually a fight against NATO, as it turns out. And Russians, just like Gurulyov himself, can simply endure and tolerate these minor inconveniences for the greater cause.
Information is one of the main elements in the struggle between us and the NATO countries. So here we probably can't do things any other way. I understand that this causes inconvenience for many people, including myself, because I have my own Telegram channel that people read. Nevertheless, these are the demands of the times, and there are threats related to information security. We probably need to respond to them.
Switching to Max or already on it?
I'm already on Max. I have a channel on Max, and basically I already conduct all my work correspondence on Max today.
Isn't that scary for you?
It's not scary for me.
This General Gurulev is a remarkably bold individual. He's certainly not hesitant to carry out his personal correspondence on Max. Well, yes, of course, it's a pity that Parquet General Gurulev is never at the front, in the thick of the occupying army, which is literally howling because of the Telegram blockade. But in fact, General Gurulev went even further and remembered that, as it turns out, Marshal Zhukov fought without any Starlinks or any telegrams at all and made it all the way to Berlin. And to achieve victory, you just need to mobilize the entire male population of the country. Naturally, without taking General Gurulev himself, he's certainly needed in the rear, but especially the students. You see, old Marshal Zhukov, look at that. He fought his way all the way to Berlin without any Starlinks at all. It's a pity, by the way, that the general, in his recollections, stopped at Zhukov and didn't remember that comrades like Genghis Khan, for example, Alexander, the Macedonian won his victories not only without Starlinks, but also without aviation, without tanks, and without firearms. Well, we should give it a try too. Maybe it'll work out. But I really have to say, General Gurulyov is certainly not alone in this. In his support, and of course primarily in support of the Russian authorities, the well-known propagandist Ivan Pankin from Komsomolskaya Pravda spoke out. He was accusing military correspondents and various ZID military bloggers of being blocked on Telegram because, according to his view, they were writing far too much inconvenient information about the actual events at the front, and the Russian authorities, they got tired of it.
Because, of course, the main point here isn't just that Telegram doesn't comply with Russian law, or at least it's not entirely about that. So let's just put it that way for now. And let's all say a big thank you to all these endless anonymous insiders, to all these countless military bloggers, the smartest people in the world, who know everything, who dig up all sorts of filth. They've been spreading nonsense all this time, like the panic attack during the incursion into the Kursk region and so on and so forth. There have been a huge number of such episodes. At the end of the first segment, I mentioned that as far as I'm concerned, the government is fed up with all of this. And most likely, of course, Telegram will be blocked. Said it and forgot about it, as they say. And now here we are, it has actually come to the point where they really started to restrict it. Thanks to those who endlessly predicted mobilization, shared brilliant insider information about what was supposedly happening at the front, though of course nothing of the sort was actually happening, and told stories about how things would turn out later, and things of that nature. And when you look at the big picture, I guess certain people just got a little tired of everything that was going on.
All these were voices from the Moscow establishment, which is hundreds of kilometers away from the front line. A completely different stance is taken by those who try to bring this kind of trench-level fascist truth. Those very same war correspondents and Z-bloggers and the propagandist Ivan Punk from Komsomolskaya Pravda accused them of being the reason Telegram is being blocked.
Now they're writing about the problem that actually exists. Yes, it does exist. Who came up with all this? But they need to be treated because they're fools. Unfortunately, it's a well-known fact to absolutely everyone that all coordination between units at the front is tied directly to the constant use of Telegram. That's it. So ahead of us are some changes, some problems. We'll find some way to solve them. Of course, it's really frustrating because support had already dropped, and now it's going to fall even more by several times. I don't know how to move all the subscribers over there, but we'll figure something out.
These days, it is sometimes quite amusing and even a bit nostalgic to take these fascinating little journeys back into the past. It is truly interesting to see exactly what all the different people on television were saying right before the Telegram app was officially blocked across the country.
They say you don't understand. The system that was created, this GPS, it's for everyone. A war is starting.
To force peace, right? How long is it? Our so-called 3-day war, or whatever they call it, right? Operation.
8 days. 888.
No, 888, but originally it was supposed to be 3 days. And then suddenly, bam. And they cut off our GPS. And it turns out we need GLONASS. We really like Elon Musk. He is incredibly progressive and courageous. He has a profound passion for the Russian space program and holds Korolev in deep respect. He is just that kind of person. A call from the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, from that Nazi, scoundrel, and executioner Fedorov, and all the Starlinks get shut off. And we had more of them than they did. And who exactly told you that Elon Musk is somehow better or worse than Durov, for example? Well, our entire nation is on Telegram, everything is working great, but the servers are not actually under our control. And what makes you think that someone higher up won't call, and Durov himself won't carry out a series of operations? And that's it. And it will be gone. And many people at the front are using Telegram.
So I just wanted to take a moment to highlight this example because it's actually quite incredibly amusing. Solovyov, out of habit, was looking for an enemy in the so-called damned West and in a potential traitor, Durov, the traitor. But in reality, it wasn't Durov who shut down Telegram, but their very own people back home. Roskomnadzor, well, on the orders of the presidential administration and in coordination with Putin. No, I looked there. Traitors and enemies. Soloviev. However, Solovyov himself, although he sternly rebuked and criticized Mironov for condemning those who slowed down and blocked Telegram, now complains about the significant and noticeable decline in his total subscriber numbers and other technical problems. He also says that Max, who is of course absolutely wonderful, is on the wonderful messenger. And the developers are wonderful too, but it has one major drawback. It is completely and utterly impossible to actually work in it. Of course, the people who cared about it deserve huge thanks for their efforts. But what they ended up producing is simply an absolute and total piece of crap.
I have no idea exactly what is being done or why it's being done. I just look at the unfiltered and incredibly dry statistics. Usually, when we finally turned it on ourselves and checked the results, we discovered that there was something quite unexpected happening inside. Back in the year 1910, there were active broadcasts being shared on Telegram. Now, as a direct result of the slowdown and everything else, there are currently 3,656. And before the slowdown began, we had, well, about 1,400,000. Now, this drop in numbers is incredibly significant, and we have already lost 1,300. I'm absolutely more than happy to switch to the dark mode version of Telegram. But when I downloaded this specific application for myself and looked at it, I just activated the settings quietly and very calmly. So I open up Telegram and the messages start coming in, and honestly, everything's going great, really, everything is looking very good. But then I go to find my specific channel, I take a close look, and there is Solovyov. Please turn on and join the video broadcast. However, it shows me that the group video chat is temporarily unavailable right now. These features will appear in new versions of the app. You ask me if I understand or not. Okay. I go into the National Messenger Max. Of course, it's absolutely essential. I fully support and stand behind the National Messenger Max, and I treat it with all due respect. People are doing a tremendously significant and very important job, and the state truly requires this service. Number of subscribers, 408,955. But there is absolutely no video functionality at all. That is, the video stream simply does not exist at this time. It is probably still in development, and as for when it will finally appear, I honestly have no idea. Based on this, without getting into any politics or anything else, I'm asking a very straightforward question, with all due respect and with all the essential requirements for the state. But our channel is not currently being included in the multiplex. We don't have a multiplex. We are solving important tasks. We report on what is happening at the front. We deliver information, and to a rather large audience at that, including those outside our homeland, for whom Max, even when it appears as a video broadcast, will be unavailable. Despite all the flaws and imperfections, despite all the challenges we face. And I just want to ask, so now, based on all this, what exactly are we expected to do next? But I'm talking about the product. I need a tool. If I'm told that this tool is being taken away from me, all right, what tool do they want to offer me instead? Video streaming. Rather than using YouTube, we are streaming on vContakte. Thank you very much. We stream on all available platforms in every environment that exists, of course. Here, we found a replacement. But how am I supposed to reach the audience that's on Telegram? Yes, I understand that this isn't the most important task, not the most important state issue, but it's just the consumer's perspective. I communicate with many people who are currently fighting and on the front lines through Telegram. I am really quite curious. Do they themselves actually experience these slowdowns and restrictions? Considering that much of the communication happening on the front lines is exclusively conducted via Telegram. It's neither good nor bad, it's just data. Are we truly prepared at this moment to offer them a convenient, simple, and clear transition to a secure system? I hope so.
Well, the various complaints, it's honestly quite hilarious how Solovyov desperately tries to explain to follow the party line. So if they've said Telegram needs to be blocked, then it's the right thing to do. Everything's fine. Yes, and of course the developers at Max are wonderful people. It's just that working with him is impossible, but otherwise everything is great. The people are good, but they just make a crappy product. So, among other things, it is all rather confusing and unclear. You have to praise the bosses for doing the right thing while also trying to criticize the resulting consequences. How to do that while maintaining any kind of common sense is absolutely impossible to achieve. In general, in the battle over Telegram, two forces have clashed, and both of these forces are the war party. Let me say right away, ordinary citizens have absolutely nothing to do with it. In other words, there is absolutely no concern or consideration whatsoever that a large number of, so to speak, residents of Russia, essentially the vast majority of the general population, are being thrown out of the social networks they're used to. It simply does not matter in the slightest degree, and absolutely nobody seems to care about it at all. There are two completely obvious forces at play. On one side, there's the presidential administration, specifically Kirienko, who has commercial interests here, obvious ones in this case. His son currently serves as the head of vKontakte, and in Max as well, there are significant commercial interests involving the children of, in particular, the highly influential and powerful friends of Putin. Plus, there is the FSB, which, driven by their long-standing institutional habits, is always looking for, so to speak, an American connection everywhere. On the other hand, there is the army, which is undoubtedly suffering from significant losses and challenges. In this clash between the presidential administration and the FSB on one side, and the army, which is undoubtedly suffering from all this, I, paradoxical as it may seem in this battle, am on the side of the presidential administration and the FSB. For the first time in my life, I wished even a bit of success to these deeply repugnant forces. Simply because at this point any weakening of the occupying army is a significant strategic advantage, and blocking Telegram is a very substantial blow to the occupier's army. But aside from the ongoing battle over Telegram, a deep and noticeable fracture has occurred within the so-called party of war in the camp of the ethnics, something like a sudden awakening. The Z-Patriots have finally started to get suspicious. They have increasingly started to realize that Russia clearly cannot withstand a prolonged and exhausting war of attrition, especially given the ever-tightening international sanctions and the frequent strikes on the oil sector. For example, Oleg Tsaryov, a prominent former Ukrainian politician who defected to Russia, recently went on record to state that Russia urgently needs to bring a swift conclusion to the special military operation because otherwise it might cease to exist altogether.
The continuing conflict and its consequences are exceptionally hazardous for Russia. If peace comes now, then yes, everything can be resolved. If not, then the country will face a very serious challenge and it will have to respond somehow. Not responding is not an option, because if foreign trade collapses, it will be a catastrophe. It would be disastrous for the budget, for the ability to finance the special military operation, and for maintaining a normal standard of living. It would push Russia to the brink of existence. What is happening now with the tankers in open waters?
My dear fellow comrades, I want to say that the special military operation is proceeding in strict accordance with the established schedule. Hence, everything is going exactly according to the plan.
Everything is proceeding strictly according to schedule. According to plan? Of course, what this plan is and how the schedule ends is more or less already obvious. So, it appears that quite clearly the crisis has begun to affect even the holy of holies of the Russian economy, the vital national defense industrial sector. It is being reported, in particular by various prominent public figures, that at some of these defense enterprises, salaries have not been paid for several months now. The politician Dmitry Demushkin,
the man who's here today to attend the section, works at a defense enterprise. He hasn't been paid for 6 months already, but he hasn't filed a complaint about his salary. I said, listen, but that's a criminal offense, you know? Well, in theory, you could just file a complaint right now and that's it. I mean, not paying salaries for 6 months at a defense enterprise, how is that even possible? Especially since it's all government contracts. He says, yeah, but still, our managers gather us and say, we'll pay you 20 or 30,000 now. Some kind of advance payment? And so again, they tell us to wait because otherwise they'll just let everyone go, like disband us all. So we're seeing missed payments already starting. We're seeing there are catastrophic shortfalls in the budget where people are stopping social payments that would seem sacred to the authorities, when several budgets have already announced that they can't even pay funeral money to the soldiers anymore. That is to say, they simply cannot calculate this properly and include it in the budget. They find they can't predict in advance exactly how much money they will need to pay. They just can't. They can't calculate the losses. They can't calculate these payments.
A kind of belated realization is now gradually dawning on the commentators and people on television regarding both the situation in Ukraine and the role of its leader. The exact same group of professional propagandists who for years adamantly maintained and insisted that Zelensky was merely a clown or a drug addict are now openly saying that they completely underestimated his capabilities, and that in fact he is not a clown at all, but a highly serious, deeply strategic and cunning adversary. I
would like to agree with Andrei Francevich's assessment that someone out there, some external forces are controlling Ukraine. Any external forces, one could negotiate with them, but in my view, the situation is worse. It's more advanced, more far gone. Ukraine is acting much more independently than we would like, than we thought.
It doesn't matter at all what surname the person holding the office of President of Ukraine has.
It doesn't matter at all. And that's the dead end. That's the horror of the current situation.
Zelensky is, without a doubt, an independent figure, and he really is an obstacle to reaching a peace agreement. Europe has structured the situation around Zelensky in this way: that neither Europe nor the US can remove him by force, make him step down, or make him obey.
So, about Zelensky. I've said this in this studio a long time ago. When people say we're overestimating him, we've actually been underestimating him all along, portraying him as a clown, as just anyone. Well, we would like the enemy to be a caricature. Sadly, we have a grave
picture.
The formidable adversary that we are facing, unfortunately, is actually a very serious and significant threat to our mission.
After enduring almost 4 long years of this devastating war, we have finally begun to understand something very important. It is truly hard to say exactly when or if they will ever fully realize and accept that there was never any fascism in Ukraine and that this war was simply not worth starting for any reason at all. Most likely many of them have already figured this out. It's just that, for now, it's dangerous to talk about it. However, among the Z supporters there is a certain core of people obsessed with conspiracy theories. Well, it must be said that this isn't just a problem among the Z supporters. We've talked about this a lot on our channel, but the Z supporter conspiracy theorists, realizing that after 4 years of war, Russia has achieved nothing, immediately started shouting that the authorities are traitors and spies.
The security of people of such rank, of such scale, perhaps this is even being done deliberately. We know this rotten system. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. And what happened, happened. It's not the authorities. There's a group of spies within the authorities. There's a group of traitors and agents. They're deliberately sabotaging things. And their very own leadership and people who are deliberately destroying their own soldiers and officers, who are intentionally making sure the country gradually and inevitably sinks all the way to the very bottom. The only true ally we have left is Belarus. Everything else, through their weakness, their deliberate and calculated weakness, they've systematically driven away from us toward the stronger ones. The same goes for the Starlink incident. It showed that we truly have absolutely nothing left to rely on. There's no replacement for it because the Azov space program was practically destroyed completely and nothing has been recreated. Fools, corrupt officials? No, secret spies, undercover agents, and deceitful traitors. It can't be any other way. And who took billions of dollars out of the country right before the special military operation? Abroad, which was frozen, and even before that, money was being taken out. $1 trillion. And who took it out? Fools? No. Agents, spies.
It is often argued that one of the primary and most significant pillars supporting the ideology of fascism is nothing more than simple human stupidity. To illustrate this point more clearly, I want you to listen very carefully to the specific words spoken by this Russian woman when she was recently asked whether or not she truly wants this ongoing war to finally come to an end.
We all need it. We need peace. But even before that, we really need to look at Donbass, return to Russia. And I would also like to see Odessa, Nikolaev return to Russia. That is to say, all of the strategic access to the open sea, after all, but that is our sovereign Russian territory.
Has your family somehow
Was she hurt maybe, or maybe someone was involved?
Yes, there is. Actually, 2 people died, but they were not close relatives of mine. 2 people have recently passed away from this life. One of them was a close relative, and the other was a dear boyfriend. We used to live in the same house. There are those individuals whom I used to know very well. 2 people, both of whom were named Zhenya. They have both since departed from this world, while they were still at a very young and tender age.
That is to say, Russia and this woman herself are personally and deeply interested in ending the war. She fervently dreams of a day when the fighting will finally end, and simultaneously hopes for a lasting peace. For her, this means not only taking Donbass, but also Odessa and Mykolaiv, and even better, probably all of Ukraine. It would be interesting to ask her, why does she personally need Donbass, and even more so Odessa and Mykolaiv? Most likely, she wouldn't be able to say anything coherent. She might recall some nonsense from television, but a special circle of propaganda hell is reserved for Ukrainian defectors who betrayed their people and, together with Solovyov, call for killing Ukrainians. Many of them have close relatives currently living in Ukraine, like Vasil Vakarov, for example, a Ukrainian on call from Solovyov's studio, who periodically serves as a literal spittoon for Solovyov. His own daughter lives in Ukraine and firmly considers Russia an aggressor.
Well,
Let's take, say,
25 years.
25 years.
20 years, yes.
They definitely won't reconcile. The children. I think I asked my daughter, who is 20 years old, and she says, no, the Russians are to blame. Even though I live here, she talks to me, she says, the Russians are to blame.
I really wonder how he talks to his own daughter, on whose innocent head he is now calling for these rockets and bombs. He takes part in talk shows with Solovyov, who believes that all Ukrainians should be killed. It's interesting how he talks to his daughter after that. It's notable that this is actually a very common story among Ukrainian defectors. For example, Yulia Vityazeva's father lives in Odessa. The traitor Yuri Podolyaka has a disabled child in the Sumy region. At the same time, all of them demand not to spare their own children and to bomb them even harder. This, of course, says a lot about the kind of people Putin's circle is used to relying on. A sudden and startling awakening after almost 4 long years of the Great War has now turned even the most rabid propagandists into the de facto oppositionists. Take a moment to listen to how Solovyov, practically a pure Voltairean, critiques Putin's economic policy without, of course, directly mentioning his name, the author by name.
So someone is coming up, someone is making schemes somewhere. And the banks. I just don't understand what the banks are offering. Take out loans that, well, with such an interest rate, when you take one, you basically have to sell a kidney right away. So what's the point? What are we trying to achieve? To carry out the 156th, which nobody needs. A conference with the participation of the mega regulator, which will tell people that what they see is actually not white, but black, and that they just don't understand a damn thing. The main thing is, just don't go to the store. This whole activity of the mega regulator reminds me of the movie Don't Look Up. Seriously, it's just like that. So what? What goal are we pursuing? All right, the war will end, we'll win, great. People will come home from the front. And what will be waiting for them at home? An economy that's ready to create 500,000 jobs so that people who are used to earning over 200,000 rubles a month would at least agree to 150,000. Well, of course. Can you show me where such salaries exist? Just tell us, please. Moscow has shown and continues to show excellent results. And even in my favorite city, despite the titanic efforts of the Moscow government, you walk around and see these restaurants closing. These little shops are closing down. Why? People are having money problems. There are empty new apartment blocks all over the country. Because who can afford to buy?
Really, who can actually afford it?
And why?
And what goal are they pursuing?
Ah, yes. The main thing is not to use such smart words like stagflation, or if everything is terrible and we still can't deal with these stupid indicators, then let's just use a technical term. It's not a recession, it's a technical recession.
And what exactly makes it technical?
Really, it's just a certain kind of Carbonari figure. Basically, he is a genuine leader of the political opposition, not someone like Solovyov. But honestly, for some reason, in all of his righteous anger, he only ever talks about some specific financial regulators and so on. But what about the reasons? Is it really not obvious? Is it really not obvious that the war is behind all these economic problems? Well, when there's a fire in the house, of course you can point to other shortcomings, some problems, I don't know, cockroaches, something else, bedbugs, and other nuisances. But the main problem during a fire is the fire itself. And the reason for everything Solovyov is talking about is, of course, the war. But, of course, you can't mention the war as the reason because then you'll get kicked out. You'll just get kicked out with a black mark or even end up in jail. But overall, the sense of obvious failure and defeat gives rise to impotent rage and hatred, which the propagandists constantly vent in calls to destroy the whole world.
The Poles want to mobilize themselves. 500,000. Some joined the active reserve with massive resources. They're now training the public, and everything else. We can't ignore this because it's a threat, first and foremost, to Kaliningrad. Let me remind you that there are 2 heavy mechanized divisions that...
Deployment. This is a threat to Russia.
Yes. Overall, that's the whole point.
But why would they attack Kaliningrad? I don't see any sense in that. If I were in their place, I would attack Belarus first. And only then open a second front with Kaliningrad.
Well, that's...
Right from the beginning. They need, so to speak, to completely cut off our troops' ability to respond in any way. And then...
To break the blockade.
Yes.
By the way, here, well, and...
Furthermore, they will reason like this. If they invade the territory of Belarus, we won't strike Belarus with nuclear weapons. That is, they will try to immediately shift the war to a conventional one, so that we don't use nuclear weapons against the territory of the Union state. Nuclear weapons would be reasonable.
And in this framework, it becomes logical.
Your words.
Rear interference.
But they don't understand that in that case we would simply destroy Warsaw right away. Krakow.
That's what I'm saying.
Gdansk, we would just wipe it out. And without any distinction, completely destroy it. I could immediately, with a nuclear strike, wipe everything out.
The rear, and they left the Americans the Camp Kosciuszko base in Poland, a huge national park. It's not just a vast area anymore.
They have now
thousands of American equipment.
We'll notify the Americans 7 minutes before the strikes, as they did before their strike on Syria. Fair enough.
Makes sense, of course.
He'll have time to say his prayers.
Well, we'll just completely annihilate every single person with a massive nuclear strike. Moreover, since these calls for a nuclear apocalypse are heard every day, just every single day, they no longer seem so much frightening as they do dreary and cartoonish. Solovyov and the other inhabitants of the Nightingale droppings more and more resemble those mutated Pickwickian waistcoats from the Golden Calf. While those previous examples were merely humorous, these are also quite disgusting. But in general, since real-world events give precious little reason for optimism to the supporters of the fascist Reich, they frequently descend into a state of idle dreaminess, in the style of Manilov or even in the manner of Balzaminov. For example, Solovyov says it would be nice if we just closed our eyes. It would be nice if the Germans attacked the American base Ramstein, and then we would dash in Suvorov style to save the Americans, and then together we would fight the Europeans.
By the way, the possibilities of waging war in the European theater of operations of the Air Force. In military actions, with the Russian and American armies united against the army of the European Union.
It doesn't matter at all?
How fantastical such a scenario may seem right now, I absolutely do not rule out that it could happen.
Well, for example, the Germans might make a move and try to deal with the Ramstein base.
Or suddenly they decide to get rid of the Americans who are in Europe. Trump will turn to us for help. And we, like Suvorov, will break through the Alps across Europe to rescue the Americans who will be blockaded by the enraged, European troops. Why not? And old Suvorov, with his grey forelock, will still be waving his saber, leading the legendary warriors.
Beautiful, huh, an idle army?
You will understand China soon enough. I'm sorry about the boy.
Yes, no, still, of course, it would be beautiful and tempting. Perhaps Putin should have appointed someone else instead of Medinsky as the clown to head the negotiating delegation, someone like Vladimir Solovyov. Well, that would make it completely clear to everyone that there is no genuine intention for peace here. There is no sign of an end to these negotiations. Well, for example, something like this. A speech by Soloviev shown during the negotiations, I think, would really help clear the minds of the American delegation. This is particularly significant when you consider that every single word that you are about to hear right now is being broadcast live on the main state television channel.
How long are we going to play at being humane? Our humanity is perceived as weakness. The fact that we are not using tactical nuclear weapons, that we are not using the most powerful non-nuclear munitions, is not seen as our humanitarianism. In war, any humanitarianism from the opposing side is not recognized. It is seen only as weakness. Right now, they are trying to destroy all the infrastructure in Belgorod. They've brought in HIMARS over there. Again, by whom? Who's in them? Who's directing them?
Does anyone really doubt that after this they will try to
destroy Bryansk? Do we not understand what needs to be done to prevent this? Well, fine, let's keep playing around. Do we really not understand that for this purpose, Kharkiv must be wiped off the face of the earth? At the same time, it is necessary to officially warn the million-strong city that is being used to strike Belgorod. Citizens of Ukraine, you have 3 days to leave this city. And then systematically demolish it block by block. Because it has access to the ring road, to Kharkivska, to the bypass, and from there, it strikes at Belgorod's infrastructure. Moreover, let me remind you that the Ukrainian authorities don't care about the lives of Ukrainian citizens. Zelensky doesn't care. But it is important to us. Therefore, we warn you, leave these cities. But we must turn the entire area from which they can reach us into our infrastructure. Accordingly, scorched earth.
It is necessary to destroy. With this sadistic pleasure, Solovyov repeats it in front of his accomplices, discussing yet another fantasy about killing Ukrainians and eliminating Ukraine. All of this, more than anything else, resembles yet another, a kind of administrative staff meeting held in Auschwitz, where the camp personnel discuss the techniques of mass murder.
It may not be pleasing that, finally over the past 2 weeks, we have started targeting major Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Taking out the 750 kilovolt substations, of which there are only 6, of course, seriously undermines the entire Ukrainian energy sector. Today we were just looking at their own data. The average consumption in percentage terms. There is no saturation of electricity in any region, only in 2 western regions. There, it's around 48%, while in all the others, it's 36 or lower.
It destroys. It needs to be destroyed, finished off completely, so I appeal to all residents of Ukraine. Leave the big cities. Leave.
Well, that's right. It needs to be finished off.
And the railway needs to be completely destroyed as well. Agreed. That is, we need to strike the way our generals were taught at the academy.
For example,
Bridges are more difficult purely
technically, the ones
If we can reach the target, we need to destroy it now.
After nearly 4 long years of relentless war, it is already clear to every single person that not only the war itself, but, and even its official name, Special Military Operation, is absolutely hypocritical. It sounds utterly ridiculous and deeply offensive. It has become so extreme that even the most bloodthirsty ghouls are now openly protesting. But Solovyov, while strictly adhering to the party line, suppresses this protest at its very inception. The mystery remains. Why, until this moment,
Now, why does the Kyiv railway station still stand right in the middle of Kyiv?
I don't understand.
What do they call it over there? But why do we have to watch all these scumbags arrive in grand ceremonies every time? Westerners at the train stations hugging and kissing each other on the lips? I don't get it. That station is absolutely unnecessary. If they want to get to Kiev, let them do it with transfers and preferably under very heavy guard and escort. I hope that in this case we will also be able to hunt them. I mean, this whole strange war that's been going on for 5 years now, it doesn't correspond at all to the challenge that's growing. You and I can see this perfectly well, that despite the enormous amount of work being done by the government, the financial sector, and the country as a whole, but we understand that the burden of war on the country, on the economy, is enormous. And throughout this entire period, they're also actively attempting to cut our tendons and constrict us by tightening tourniquets on the external front, our, so to speak, veins that feed the economy. And in this area, again, there is a lot we can do, but we don't always do it. But here inside the country, we must finally rid ourselves of the illusion that we are conducting some kind of special military operation. Just the phrase itself, special military operation. It has discredited itself to such an extent that in general, we use this abbreviation, but it's laughable. It's offensive to those people who are fighting a very hard war.
I'm honestly not sure because it could be seen as offensive, depending on what you mean by it.
well, yes, it depends on what you mean, but in general, deviating from the party line is only allowed very carefully, only by Solovyov, and only in the right direction. Criticizing the name of the special military operation when both Putin and Lavrov still use it is already unacceptable. Generally speaking, this whole situation of obsessive, ridiculous nonsense about tactical nuclear weapons, about the idea that all restrictions must be lifted and it must be done without fail. So to speak, to strike with nuclear weapons, this is already becoming ridiculous because in reality, well, anyway, let's listen to Solovyov.
We simply need to eliminate every single restriction that we have placed upon ourselves and begin to act with much greater force and determination. Every single time that I travel beyond the front lines of the conflict, I make it a point to regularly ask my close friends, many of whom are now in very high positions, what items should I bring back for them?
And the classic traditional response from one of the distinguished Russian commanders is tactical nuclear weapons. Enough. Seriously, that's really enough already. Let's get serious now. And then this whole bunch sitting at the negotiations in the Emirates, all these Budanovs and the rest, will realize that the jokes are over.
It would be truly fascinating to see a comprehensive list of those supposedly brilliant Russian commanders, along with a detailed account of their grand and brilliant successes in this ongoing war, a conflict which the so-called Second Army in the world is currently waging against the 20th Army in the world. And they can't do anything. And where are these brilliant commanders? Where are their brilliant successes? As for nuclear weapons, it's unclear why they are even needed. Because Solovyov is constantly going beyond the front line. As he says, he goes past the ribbon and then makes his way back again. It would appear that he believes he alone is already capable of handling the Ukrainian armed forces by himself. A separate issue to consider is the official attitude of Russia toward the Olympic Games, which are currently taking place right now. In this situation, of course, we must look at the fact that for the very first time in a long while, for many years, starting back in 1908, when, in general, the overall attitude towards sports was quite different and sports were not really perceived as such. It functioned as a core element of state propaganda and served as a fundamental pillar of official state policy. But now, in this modern era, sports have undoubtedly become a massive part of state policy, much like what we saw in Nazi Germany. Let us remember the Olympic Games in 1936, and similarly in fascist Russia, the Sochi Olympics. Those specific events represented the absolute peak of this calculated and aggressive state sports policy. And the fact that now the Olympics are practically without Russia, without the Russian coat of arms, without the Russian flag, causes intense rage among the propagandists. And in particular, Vladimir Solovyov takes all of this rage and directs it at the Russian athletes who are participating in the Olympic Games under a neutral flag. He rhetorically asks what this neutral flag even represents, and then he demands that all Russian athletes should instead be sent to the front lines of the ongoing war. Not
under different flags, he is under a neutral one.
Competing. I don't know what neutral flag they mean. I've seen the front many times. I haven't seen a single neutral flag. No matter where I've been, I haven't seen a single neutral flag. Ovechkin, the player who says he's on Team Putin, is Russian and is for Putin. I saw him, the one who set the record. Our athletes, outstanding ones, shooters, by the way, thank you. The Federation for sniping competitions goes to the Emirates and Thailand. They take first places, win, and celebrate with flags and the anthem. I saw, but this I don't know. I guess I'm supposed to root for them. Yes, I guess I'm supposed to care about them. For whoever is there, who...
The skier, the figure skaters
could win a medal. You know, with the weather at the front right now, skiers are desperately needed. Desperately, figure skaters in general with tremendous fire.
Just cross the ice.
Lawyers
would have come in handy.
Figure skaters are perfect.
Not about freezing.
Not about freezing. That's how you show everything you've got. So, biathletes are also in high demand. They were like running officers. The country is at war, even when it was peacetime, and even then, somehow... Well, what about us? It was hard to get used to it. Maybe it will resolve itself. Well, considering that tonight is an evening of pluralism on Russian state television and among the members of the Russian elite in general, to provide a bit of contrast, I would like for us to listen to and watch a significantly different perspective on the upcoming Olympic Games and on the actual participation of Russian athletes, a total of just 13 Russian athletes competing under a neutral flag. So, from the Minister of Sports, Mr. Degtyarev. Well, just in case anyone out there doesn't know or perhaps doesn't quite remember, the Minister of Sports, Mr. Degtyarev, is a former bathhouse attendant for Mr. Zhirinovsky. He was later, so to speak, sent to Khabarovsk in order to try to quell the protests that were happening there. He failed to accomplish that task, so he was transferred to sports. So let's hear more about his perspective on the upcoming Olympics and how we should treat the issue of the neutral flag. Go ahead.
Some people say betray or don't betray. Listen, our athletes were even called bums by some officials. Where are they now? Retired.
Some are in the woods, some
are retired. And they called those who go to international competitions foreign agents. Despite everything, under pressure, through hardships, through courts, our guys go and bring gold back to Russia. They didn't throw their passports on the table, like some people did.
Plus, some athletes changed.
New citizens. I always draw the public's attention to this, to those who are outraged about our athletes, those who go there, including under a neutral flag. They never renounced the anthem or the flag. They won. The whole world knows they're Russians. They brought it home and are celebrated. But
things change when athletes switch nations.
Of course, that's the real issue, and we're fighting against this. We've even introduced, I signed such an order into regulation. We even stripped a chess player of the Grandmaster title for changing their sports citizenship. So that means here,
we're dealing with it. Who was it?
We'll just search it on Yandex. Who did Degtyarev strip of the title? The Grandmaster title?
All right.
You'll get the answer.
They have such a sad face.
So, look, here we feed them, the athletes, educate them, provide them with trainers, and provide them with facilities. And then suddenly he threw down his passport and left.
It's unfair.
Wait. Deprive of everything, ban entry into the country, and use of our sports facilities. And we will come to this.
If they ask later?
The flag has been returned, so we're returning.
That's exactly what we're talking about. So this is a very delicate issue. But in principle, there can be no compromises here. To go and compete in international competitions despite the circumstances, even if it's under a neutral flag, bringing a medal back to Russia, serving as an example, so to speak, and fighting for that spot, that's one thing. But changing citizenship, well, that's pure betrayal. So that's my opinion, and it's the right one.
That last phrase is wonderful. That's my opinion, and it's the right one. Well, dear friends, that's where we'll wrap things up. This was the 169th episode of the program Mediafrenia. With that, I conclude our session for today.